Some warriors are remembered as heroes, while others fade into the shadows. The Cheyenne Dog Soldiers, however, were neither just legends nor ordinary soldiers. They were fierce symbols of uncompromising resistance against U.S. expansion. But who were they really? What made them so feared by their enemies? You've likely heard of their legendary battles, but there's much more to their story. In this video, we'll take a look at some of the most downright shocking facts about the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers. Number 1. They literally nailed themselves to the ground mid-battle. One of the most striking and unique practices of the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers was their commitment to fight until the end, no matter the odds. Known as dog ropes, these sashes made from buffalo hide, adorned with porcupine quills and feathers, symbolized a warrior's vow to stand his ground until death. These ropes weren't mere adornments. They were physical manifestations of their unbreakable commitment to battle. In the heat of the fight, a dog soldier would drive a picket pin through the end of his dog rope, anchoring himself to the battlefield. This act was a sacred ritual of defiance, a statement to both his comrades and enemies that he would fight until he could no longer stand. During intense moments of battle, this act often had a rallying effect on other warriors. Take, for example, the story of a warrior named Little Man. During a retreat, he staked himself to halt the enemy's advance, which inspired the rest of the warriors to regroup and fight back. According to a 2017 Great Plains Quarterly study by Dr. Carol R. Fenno, this ritual was as much about psychological warfare as it was about physical commitment. The very sight of a warrior willing to tether himself in the face of overwhelming odds became a symbol of courage and determination, rallying the tribe to continue the fight. However, once a dog soldier was staked to the ground, he could not release himself. Only a fellow warrior could unpin him, often after ensuring the safety of others. This ritual of release reinforced the deep communal bonds of the Cheyenne tribe. The last recorded instance of staking occurred at the Battle of Summit Springs in 1869, where a warrior named Wolf with Plenty of Hair staked himself to protect his comrades, ultimately sacrificing his life. This act of defiance was documented in a 2020 article, which showed its spiritual weight and lasting impact on both Native morale and U.S. military accounts. 2. Their defiance triggered one of the bloodiest massacres in U.S. history. In 1864, the Dog Soldiers and the U.S. Army found themselves on opposite sides during the Sand Creek Massacre. While some Cheyenne leaders suggested avoiding further bloodshed by negotiating with the U.S. government, the Dog Soldiers refused any compromise. From their perspective, history had already shown them that the U.S. could not be trusted. Past agreements had been violated, and they saw the government's promises as nothing more than empty words designed to strip them of their land and culture. They believed that surrendering their lands or negotiating peace would mean the end of their way of life. Their steadfast defiance led to a tragic clash with the U.S. military. On November 29, 1864, Colonel John Chivington and his men, believing that the Cheyenne had surrendered, attacked a peaceful camp of Cheyenne and Arapaho people who had been promised protection by the U.S. government. The massacre, which left over 150 Cheyenne men, women, and children dead, was a brutal reminder of how much the Dog Soldiers stood to lose. The massacre sparked outrage and grief among the Cheyennes. In the aftermath of the massacre, the Cheyenne were not silenced. Instead, the Dog Soldiers' ultimate sacrifice fueled a massive native uprising, one of the largest and most significant of the 19th century. Their refusal to surrender and the bloodshed they endured led to widespread resistance against the U.S., driving many other tribes to rally in defense of their lands. The Dog Soldiers' courage became the foundation of the Cheyennes' continued fight for survival. But their strength and resolve in battle didn't only come from military tactics or sheer numbers. It was deeply rooted in their spiritual beliefs. 3. The beliefs and rituals that set them apart. One of their core beliefs was that the spirits of their ancestors walked with them in battle, guiding their actions and protecting them. They believed that the spirits of fallen warriors would intervene during times of need, granting them strength and courage to move forward. Also, for the Dog Soldiers, their sacred connection to the elements, such as the wind, the rain, and the earth, was just as important as their bond with the buffalo. They believed that the wind carried the voices of the ancestors, whispering words of wisdom and strength. The earth beneath their feet was seen as sacred, a living entity that provided them with guidance and protection. Before heading into battle, dog soldiers would perform rituals to seek the blessing of these elemental spirits, ensuring their actions were in harmony with the natural world. These rituals included chants and invocations, asking the spirits for protection and a successful outcome in battle. Their beliefs formed the backbone of their warrior culture. The dog soldiers did not simply fight out the obligation. They fought because they believed their actions were a divine calling, ordained by their ancestors and the spirits who guided them. These spiritual beliefs imbued the dog soldiers with a fearless warrior mentality. According to the spirituality of the dog soldiers, their spirituality was inseparable from their war tactics. Davis explains, for the dog soldiers, their warrior strength was not simply physical. It was rooted in their spiritual duty to protect their people and preserve their way of life. One unique aspect of their spiritual practices was the vision quest, a rite of passage that many dog soldiers underwent to receive guidance from the spirits. During these quests, warriors would spend days alone in the wilderness, fasting and seeking spiritual visions that would provide insight into their future battles and roles within the tribe. The visions were considered divine messages, often involving encounters with spirit animals or ancestors who would offer guidance and protection. This ritual was a way to align oneself with the tribe's collective purpose and the will of the spirits. 4. They were masters of psychological warfare. One of their most effective tactics was the use of war paint, which went far beyond just decoration. War paint was a powerful tool to intimidate enemies, making the dog soldiers appear more fearsome and otherworldly. The dog soldiers used war paint to project strength and fearlessness. According to a 2019 study by Dr. James Leclerc, colors like red ochre were used to symbolize blood, transformation, and the spiritual power they believed came from battle. This was an essential part of their warrior persona, helping them enter battle with an empowered, focused mindset. The fearsome appearance of the painted warriors often created an immediate psychological impact on their enemies. Many soldiers and settlers who encountered the dog soldiers described seeing them as supernatural beings, their painted bodies almost blurring the line between myth and reality. In fact, a 2021 report in the Journal of Indigenous Studies notes that many soldiers reported visions of the dog soldiers, heightening the sense of dread and hesitation before combat. But war paint wasn't the only tool they used. The dog soldiers also wore eagle-wing bone whistles, skunk-skin belts, and feathered bonnets to make themselves even more imposing. These items combined with the paint to create a truly intimidating presence, causing enemies to see them not just as warriors, but as something beyond human. This strategy wasn't unique to the Cheyenne. Other native tribes, such as the Apache, also used war paint as part of their psychological warfare tactics. 5. They rejected peace treaties and took over leadership. The Cheyenne Dog Soldiers were unyielding in their refusal to accept any peace treaty that involved giving up their land. While other Cheyenne leaders may have been willing to negotiate with the U.S. government, the Dog Soldiers saw treaties as nothing more than empty promises. To them, signing a treaty meant ceding to the U.S. government's relentless push to force Native Americans onto reservations. They understood from painful experience that once they gave up their land, they would be stripped of their power and forced to live under the government's terms. For the Dog Soldiers, defending their land was not just a military obligation, it was a sacred duty. Their defiance was rooted in a deep spiritual connection to the land, as well as a cultural mandate to resist external forces that threatened their existence. According to Native resistance in the American West, the Dog Soldiers viewed themselves as the guardians of their culture. Historian David Martin notes, "For Dog Soldiers, their mission went beyond warfare. They were defenders of their way of life, fighting to preserve their land, their culture, and their very identity. This commitment to protecting their way of life extended to every aspect of their survival, including their resistance to forced relocation." 6. They outsmarted the government's relocation orders. After years of violent conflict and pressure from the U.S. government, the Cheyenne were forcibly relocated to reservations in Oklahoma. For many Native American groups, this was the final chapter in a story of displacement. But for the Dog Soldiers, it was just the beginning of their defiance. Led by Little Wolf, the Dog Soldiers staged one of the most remarkable acts of resistance in Native American history. and escape back to their homelands. The forced relocation was seen as an affront to their way of life, and they refused to accept being confined to land that was foreign to them. This escape was a calculated test of survival. The Dog Soldiers and their followers had to evade U.S. military forces while navigating through hostile terrain, according to native resistance movements in the West. The Dog Soldiers used their knowledge of the land to evade capture. They traveled through difficult and dangerous landscapes, relying on their expert skills as trackers and guerrilla fighters. The escape was a remarkable feat of endurance, as they moved swiftly through the wilderness, dodging enemy forces and drawing strength from their deep connection to their ancestral lands. The journey wasn't without its dangers, and many of the Dog Soldiers faced near-death situations, but their courage and leadership under Little Wolf allowed them to persevere. The escape proved that the Dog Soldiers were unwilling to submit to the U.S. government's demands, and this spirit of resistance reached its peak just over a decade later in 1876. 7. They were masters of guerrilla warfare. The Dog Soldiers were also master tacticians. While the U.S. military relied on traditional methods of warfare, the Dog Soldiers excelled in guerrilla tactics, using their deep knowledge of the land to outsmart and outmaneuver their enemies. Their success in these unconventional methods made them legendary, both within Native American tribes and in the eyes of the U.S. military, who struggled to predict and counter their methods. The Dog Soldiers used hit-and-run tactics, ambushing U.S. troops and settlers with swift, decisive strikes, and then disappearing into the terrain before the military could respond. The ability to stage ambushes, evade the enemy, and strike unexpectedly was a hallmark of their strategy. They knew the best places to hide, the most advantageous routes to take, and how to use the terrain to remain unseen. This was crucial in the constant battle of survival against the U.S. military, which, despite its superior firepower, was often unable to catch the Dog Soldiers in a direct confrontation. Modern historians such as Dr. Clara Morris has pointed out how the Dog Soldiers' tactics made them nearly untouchable to the U.S. military, which relied on a much more predictable and rigid approach. Morris states, "The Dog Soldiers' guerrilla tactics weren't merely about fighting. They were about outthinking the enemy at every turn. Their strikes were unpredictable, leaving U.S. forces frustrated, confused, and constantly on edge, unsure of when or where the next attack would come. And this defiance also fueled their stance against any form of surrender." 8. They were the silent force behind Custer's defeat. The Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876 is often remembered for its dramatic defeat of General George Armstrong Custer's forces, but it wasn't just a Sioux victory. It was also a triumphant moment for the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers. Alongside legendary leaders like Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, the Dog Soldiers played a critical role in the overwhelming defeat of Custer's troops. For the Cheyenne soldiers, it wasn't just another battle. It was a statement. A moment that defined their resistance against the U.S. military's brutal expansion into native lands. At the forefront of the battle, the Dog Soldiers led tactical assaults and fought fiercely, contributing heavily to the chaotic nature of the victory. Rather than being passive participants, they were active leaders, pushing forward with aggressive strikes that kept Custer's forces disoriented and overwhelmed. Their strategic brilliance and ability to work alongside the Sioux and other native tribes turned the tide of battle in favor of the native forces. According to historical perspectives on native resistance, the Dog Soldiers played an important role in breaking the U.S. Army's morale during the battle at Little Bighorn. The author, Dr. Emily Roberts, writes, "The Dog Soldiers' coordinated attacks were a clear demonstration of the unity and strength of native resistance, proving that despite the technological superiority of the U.S. military, Cheyenne and their allies could deliver a devastating blow when they fought as one." The victory at Little Bighorn was a rare and decisive triumph for Native Americans, especially during a time when their resistance often seemed doomed to failure. And for the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers, it was part of their duty. 9. They fought to stop the Buffalo massacres. The Cheyenne Dog Soldiers were also the guardians of the tribe's most vital resource, the buffalo. As integral members of the tribe, they played a crucial role in managing the buffalo hunts, which weren't just a means of survival, but a vital aspect of their cultural identity. The Dog Soldiers ensured that the hunts followed strict rules, preventing overhunting and making sure that each hunt contributed to the tribe's long-term survival. This responsibility went beyond mere sustenance. It was about maintaining balance and honoring the buffalo, which the Cheyenne considered sacred. These rituals and rules for hunting were passed down through generations, reflecting the Cheyenne's deep spiritual connection to the land and animals that provided for them. And as the U.S. government began to systematically destroy the buffalo herds in the late 19th century, an act aimed at breaking the strength of Native American tribes, the Dog Soldiers' role in protecting the buffalo became even more critical. The buffalo didn't only feed the Cheyenne people, but also carried their spiritual beliefs. It was a symbol of life and defiance against U.S. policies aimed at erasing their heritage.